right. Hello to anyone who would suffer and listen to this. But today we're debuting a new podcast on Waiting for Next Year. My dog promptly ruined it, which is delightful for any live read. But that's the nature of the nighttime blogger and podcaster. So first, without further ado, we're going to talk about our sponsor for today's podcast. We're sponsored by Minuteman Tickets. They're locally owned. The really nice thing about Minuteman Tickets is you get to call them instead of having to mess around on your phone. If you want to have quick access to real people to get ticket purchases done when you're under pressure or when you're in need, Minutemen are the people to call. So there are no fees if you call them. The number is 614-943-3000. It's a hassle-free experience. It's really easy. It's a way to avoid the irritation of screwing around with StubHub for 45 minutes before a game, not sure if you're going to get the tickets to get in the door. So once again, check out Minuteman Tickets. Now we're going to dive into what's happening during this first week of spring training. So today, Gage typed up an article that hopefully you've read. It discusses a couple of guys who we've reached the point of undervaluing. It leads with Jason Kipnis and Tyler Naquin. But I'm most interested right now in Tyler Naquin, okay, because this outfield's a mess. So talk about, what do you see for him moving forward? What's the upside? What are we looking at here?
Well, first of all, I think there was so much pushback on his success in 2016 because it was very fluky that it pushed the pendulum in the other direction where maybe we don't value him as much as, or maybe the valuation's right. Maybe we're a little bit undervaluing him, but there are some skills there. Obviously, I know there was a block at play, but you don't do what you did in 2016 if there's not a certifiable skill set behind it. So the biggest takeaway I had from the research that I did on that was his average exit velocity was over 4 miles per hour above league average. So he's hitting the ball hard. Maybe a little too many on the ground, but he's hitting the ball hard.
So, and what is his launch, talk about exit velocity and launch angle and sort of like how they can guide us here. What's his average launch angle? How does that influence this? And, how does exit velocity interplay with launch angle?
Well, basically, the key hit is obviously in that 13 to 30 degree launch angle range. I don't know if that's the exact specifics, but you want to get the ball, essentially you want to line drive. So you want to get the ball off the ground a little bit. Naquin's biggest issue in 2016 and 2017 is a lot of his hits were in the 5 to 10 degree range. So that means a lot of them were ending up ground balls or on the ground. If he could shift that up just a tad to get towards that 10 to, even in excess of 10, but like that 13 to 30 degree range, with his exit velocity, it would lead to a lot of extra base hits based on being line drives and fly balls. And what do you think, Mike?
Yeah. So I guess my question is, why can't he just be like the better version of Lonnie Chisenhall? Like, he crushes right-handed pitching at every level. He has better exit velocity. Is there any reason to believe he can't defend as well or better? He got knocks for playing bad defense in center field, but the guy never should have been playing center field. Why can't he just be like Lonnie Chisenhall, but maybe a little better?
Well, I think we kind of want more out of first-round picks, and I think that's why Lonnie Chisenhall catches so much flack because the Cleveland pick – I think it all starts with being a first-round pick. So everybody wants more from Naquin. They don't want to settle for him to just be a platoon bat. That's just my opinion.
Yeah,
and we already have Lonnie Chisenhall.
Yeah, but I think the interesting part is, like, Chisenhall walks out the door. He's making $7 million. Next year you can pay Naquin, the league minimum?
Yeah, Naquin's out of options, right?
So there's to me, it seems like there's a real interest for the Indians in developing Naquin as the right fielder who plays 120 games and then they have a platoon. And when you have to address multiple other, definitely left field after next year, I know it's crazy. I think we're talking about him competing for a bench spot, but all of a sudden does his development become kind of relevant to, can he just be Chisenhall for 2 years for the league minimum?
Well, you bring up an interesting point for me now because say you want him to be Chisenhall. Is it better for him to be in Cleveland sitting on the bench as a fifth outfielder or fourth outfielder? Or is it better for him to be in Columbus getting ready for 2019?
Yeah, this is like the torturous developmental question, right? Where we don't actually have a good answer, and it's probably player dependent, especially because the last two times he's been in Columbus, he's basically just raked. I mean, his WRC plus against right-handed pitching or whatever measure you want to use, has been elite in AAA, and it was really good in his 1 year big league sample.
Yeah, what is it, 140 pretty much every year in AAA? His total weighted runs created plus?
So unless they have defensive adjustments they want to make, like, isn't it sort of now's the time?
And let's say we're still fitting into that Naquin is Chisenhall idea. Does it make more sense to keep an Upton then rather than two of the same player, or not same player, but you get where I'm going with it? Does it make more sense to keep that right-handed bat and I think they need to keep Upton anyway because I think he can slot right into that Austin Jackson role, but I like Naquin a lot. I just don't know how much it makes sense, even with the depleted outfield right now, for him to be out there or on the roster on opening day.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree, and I think it all depends on Brantley, right? I just think, but I think something you mentioned and we've talked about a lot is the opening day. I think for the Naquin decision isn't a huge issue because he has one option left, correct?
Right, yeah.
And I think, too, you have this sort of opportunity where I just don't buy into both Chisenhall and Brantley playing more than 100 games apiece. Because they just haven't for the past 3 years.
Well, let me stop you on the Chisenhall thing. I mean, I know he had a nagging injury last year, but was he hurt at all? Other than he's had a ton of minor injuries, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 2017 was more major than anybody let on. Who knows with Indians injury? Anyway, Chisenhall has played. I know he missed the beginning of. He's just had a ton of minor injuries. It seems like. So I don't know what to expect on that front.
Okay, I'll give you Chisenhall. But I'll set an over/under here. Over/under 80 games for Michael Brantley. Like, how hard are you pressing the over or the under on 80 games for Michael Brantley?
80 games. So I don't think he's playing till like Memorial Day, and that's kind of where I've been at since that report came out that he wouldn't be ready to resume baseball activities until March or whatever that said. Or so if he plays Memorial Day, then if he starts on Memorial Day, then he would have to be fully healthy the rest of the year to hit 80 games or 100 games or whatever it would be. So I think you said this pretty well. So I would back off betting on that. I'm going to take the cop out. I would say under if I had to, but where are you at on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I expect him to play. If I was to create a range that I was confident he would fall in, I would say it was like 65 to 95.
Yes. Yep, 70 to 90.
So that's sort of like where I'd expect. So I think, I don't know, it just seems like between that and getting Chiz rest in his role, I just think it's so easy to get Naquin 60 games. And also I just think Naquin could look like a real badass defensively in left field. Because A, it's pretty easy to defend in Cleveland. B, he has that he has a good arm. I mean, I think it's something that was wildly overrated as a prospect because we were just like looking for plus tools to make him interesting.
It's not Zimmer's arm.
No. But I mean, then you have also that's like sort of a fun like arm outfield if you run out of Zimmer, Chisenhall, Naquin arm outfield. But I think that definitely is a fit. I guess I don't know. This outfield is so cloudy to me. And I'm interested in Naquin because, look, I just have no Rajai Davis optimism. I think Almonte is done. So you need to pick, basically, if you're like want to find a way to be somewhat optimistic about this outfield, you have to buy into Naquin being a good complementary piece, Greg Allen, Melvin Upton maybe. And I do kind of buy into Upton in his role, but I mean, if he's just going to hit lefties, he's playing 50 games.
Well, so I think the Indians are projected to win. I mean, obviously projections are projections. You can take them or leave them, but they're projected about 10, 12 games ahead of the Twins at this point, maybe.
Yeah.
So I think that allows them to make plays from a more risky standpoint with more risk and higher reward on those back end decisions. And your biggest reward potential from that grouping of outfielders you mentioned is Tyler Naquin, and I don't think it's even a question. I mean,
man, that's depressing, right? Is that depressing?
A little bit, but could have had Lorenzo Cain or Christian Yelich.
I mean, you know, what would that cost? Just a catcher who's been apparently blocked by the organization? You know.
You're going to get 110 games from him in the minors this year, right?
So quite the commodity. I guess I have another question, just to be like hot topic-y. Like, why shouldn't I be interested in Richie Schaefer, corner outfielder, doing that whole combo platoon role?
Because he struck out 35% of the time in Columbus last year.
Damn it, Gage. It was 34. Don't do him like that. It was 34.
No, I had that same question. I think Kevin Dean on Twitter said something about how last year killed the intrigue on him. And there's got to be something in that the organization sees that we don't. Or I was combing his Fangraphs page today after he hit the grand slam. I'm looking for reasons to pick him apart. And like, do you see anything?
The power's enough, and all he has to do is get his K percentage to 30 and run like a 240 ISO and not be terrible in the field, and all of a sudden he plays that role really well, right?
Right. I mean,
like, and
you're talking about 115 way to run WRC plus, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's just not – I don't think that's as difficult to run. And, I mean, this is a guy who has a higher – I think – let me check. I was about to throw out hyperbole. I always have to make sure. Fangraphs is the place to check it. But, I mean, I think you have to think outside the box to do something interesting with this outfield because I just don't think it's interesting at all. And I really don't –
It doesn't make it interesting. I'm sorry.
It makes it a little interesting for me.
Yeah.
Like,
so
all right. Give me a plus tool is what I want to know. Like, if I'm trying to make an outfield interesting. Give me an interesting plus tool.
Right. So Schaefer's got his power, and you can bank on that to make him at least not a negative player, right?
Yeah, and I mean, maybe you can't. But I just, like, to me, when I'm looking at these roles, it's just Melvin Upton's a slightly better version of Rajai Davis, maybe, but he wasn't in the bigs at all last year.
He's a slightly worse version of Austin Jackson. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, we can. And then you have...
And you could have gotten Austin Jackson for what he signed with San Francisco?
Like 2 and 6? 2 and 5, sorry.
$3 million for over 2 years. $3 million each year.
And he's really good at that role. And I also, like Brandon Guyer has wrist injuries and he sucked last year. And yeah, maybe he was playing through injuries, but like there's no reason to think that you have like your right-handed platoon bat anymore with him because he just has injury issues and he was unproductive.
And I'm kind of hot takey on that because I've never been the biggest Guyer fan. I don't dislike him. He had a huge hit off Chapman in the World Series in Game 7. But his ceiling just isn't enough to make me go, okay, let's roll. You know?
Yeah, I'm not sure his ceiling is any higher than Melvin Upton's at this point against left-handed pitching. We have one elite season from him there in that role, right?
And at least he can get on base. So there's a floor there that's higher, but
yeah, which is kind of hedged by the fact that Upton can play center at least a decent Like that's the only head.
On this year's roster for sure.
I definitely agree, and I think while I'm searching for reasons to like Richie Schaefer, it's sort of demonstrative of the fact that like this platoon situation is super crappy, and that's sort of different than the last few years where they had more interesting pieces to platoon. And I also think that it's reflective of the fact that Carlos Gomez signed for what, $1 and $3.5 million.
Yep.
Austin Jackson for $2 and $5 million. I mean, this was really not a hard role to address for any amount of capital. Not hard at all.
I really want to know what happened with the Austin Jackson stuff. Did they not want him back, or are they that tapped out financially that they just didn't even want to extend an offer? Or did they not know he was going to be that cheap?
It's nothing. And they could have done like a slightly lower offer, which with much higher incentives if they wanted to do that to protect themselves in terms of performance value.
Right. I mean, throw out there a 300 plate appearance bonus, and if he gets there, he gets there. You pay it.
Yeah, I think the more I look at the outfield, and like one of our friends, Adam Burke, keeps trying to talk me into that it's like sort of safe because you have Chisenhall who's hitting some fly balls, which is quasi interesting. You have Zimmer, whose defense might carry him to 2 WAR easily. You have Michael Brantley, who, like, when healthy, has been quasi productive, which is certainly true. But I think it's really easy to find holes. I mean, Chisenhall has never sustained any skill at the big league level. First, he's a good defender in right, then he's not. First, he's like a good hitter for average, then he's not. Then he has a fly ball percentage spike. Then I just don't know what to buy into with his skill set.
Well, you always tell me you look for one identifiable area to buy into something.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know the exact figures, but I remember looking at him last year. Chisenhall got a lot better in a lot of the plate discipline areas last year. So I don't know if that's fluky or I don't know if that's something he just his 7th or 8th, whatever year it is in the bigs, something clicked for him. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big question too. Like, that's the thing that bothers me is like he seems to get a lot better at a skill like every year, and some other skill fades. Like his DRS and defensive measures in right field were pretty mediocre last year. After that, like carrying the year before. Come on, correct me. Let's go on this. I'm a Chis hater.
I'm just saying those are noise. Screw the defensive stats most of the time. I mean, every time, like. I would say this, though. I would have been the guy saying Chis is just meh defensively when he was the, 13 or 14 defensive run saves. I don't know how many it was, but in his good years, I think he's just an average right fielder with a cannon for an arm.
And I think that's, like, part of my point is, like, I think like people really bought into him as this like elite defender when he posts this first major DRS season. It's like he's an average defender. He's made some cool adjustments. I'm ready to see him happen, but I'm not optimistic about him doing more than his normal like 1 to 1.5 WAR. Anyway,
okay, hang on. If Chis gets 100 games this year, you don't think he can put out 2 WAR?
I mean, I'm sure he can, but I'm not going to bet on him putting out more than like 1 to 1.5 because he's never done that. His highest career season is like 1.9, and he BABIP'd like 350 to get to 1.9 WAR.
Okay, so 1.5 WAR, 100 games. I would take that bet.
Take that?
If he hits a 100 game plateau, I would bet he gets to 1.5 WAR.
I mean, I think you'd have to take the over because I think he can do to 1.1 to 1.5.
Okay, let me rephrase. I would take the 2 WAR at 110 games. Give me 10 more games.
Okay. All right, I'll give it to you.
He's banged up on ankle injury and ends up in a wheelchair in September.
All right, here's the next one. I saw you tweet about this, and you said that you think like one of the highest maybe variance players on this team is Bradley Zimmer.
Yeah.
And I super agree, and I think this is something that's sort of like under discussed. Like, why do you think that? Let's talk about it.
Well, first of all, he's not the defense that you're going to get what you're going to get in center field. He's a plus defender. Maybe He'll make some great highlight plays. He's not going to be the best defender in center field in the league, but he's going to make some highlight diving catches and throw some guys out at the plate. So you know what's coming there. But he could either be, and stop me if you disagree, I feel like he could be a 135 weighted runs created plus guy, or he could be an 80 weighted runs created plus guy. Like there is like a window there, that a gap there from his plate results that we can expect that is bigger than anybody else on the team.
So I totally agree, and I think you could totally, like, if you said between 60 and 140, I'd also buy in. You don't have to hedge at 80. Like, I don't think 60 is out of the question. And I really like some of his underlying offensive tools, but I just think the offensive risk is totally there. One of the interesting things to me is I think actually we've suggested there's this like really high floor because of his defense. Like, they're noisy. You go to StatCast's like catch above average leaderboard. He's league average. He's at 0. You go to DRS and like UZR components, and his range is actually like average to a tick. Like his DRS and UZR were largely carried by that arm. You know, do we see some? Have we sort of overrated Zimmer's defensive capacity because we spent the last like 3 years watching Tyler Naquin, Rajai Davis, Colin Cowgill play a game or two in center? Like, have we lost it a little? Like, I think his defense is good, but I'm not sure it builds as high a floor as maybe we suggest it does.
Well, and the catch in Detroit with Mikey against Mikey Matuk or whatever, that was one of the best plays I've seen in the last 5 years in Indians baseball.
Sure.
But, I think average defense in center is pretty good for a team that doesn't have any other options anywhere.
I agree.
Like you can go. I mean, Greg Allen. I'm sorry, no other feasible options because Greg Allen's not making the roster.
Don't tell Jim.
Jim knows. Jim knows. No, but I also think that, like you said, they're noisy, and I thought he handled center field really well from just an eye test perspective last year. Like, it wasn't like watching Lonnie Chisenhall take a step in on a ball hit to the warning track and then try and dart back there. I don't know. You can stop me on the eye test, but
I totally buy in. I mean, he's the best defensive center fielder we've watched out there in like 8 or 9 years. I just think the standard is like really low for that, but he is enjoyable. And I think he's probably a tick above average out in center, and that does create a nice floor. I just think he's like a little inflated as a defender value. But let's talk about the offense. Like, why? I think the question for me is always, why should I buy into him actually tapping into his power?
It's hard for me to say on the power. It's really hard for me. I was always, when it was Zimmer versus Frazier, because that's what it was for a couple of years there, I was always a big Frazier guy because I can't buy into the 30% strikeout. Like, I can't buy into somebody who's one of the fastest 4 dudes in Major League Baseball that can't put the ball in play.
Yeah. But the other thing that's really weird to me, or like really frustrating, is he can't put the ball in play, but then his profile when he puts the ball in play like sort of sucks. Like, if he was putting the ball in play, if he was only striking out 15% of the time and he had a ground ball heavy profile, his legs are so good that you'd like kind of buy into the value at it.
He's an average hitter there.
But yeah, like
I mean, if he cuts the strikeouts in half and puts the ball on the ground 50% of the time, he's a 100 weighted runs created plus, right?
He's like Christian Yelich, basically. Maybe, like, I don't know. A poor man's Christian Yelich, but he's like easy through WAR because you go steal 30 bags at a high rate, you go play average defense in center, and you have 100 WRC plus. Like, that's a great player, but like that's not going to happen.
No.
So now, like, the question is to save his offensive profile. Like, I just think the ground ball percentage has to change, or like you just don't save his offensive profile from being pretty meh.
No, like you said, I think he has to either take 10% off his Ks, drop that down to 20, under 20% clip, or he has to take 10% off his ground balls. Uh, that has to be a one or the other thing for him to see that jump, in my opinion.
And I think I think you would agree like the ground ball shaving is going to be way easier than 10Ks.
I don't even care about the 30% strikeouts as much, even though that's my shtick in minor league baseball. That's a first stat I look at. Uh, I don't even think that's as big of a deal if you're putting the ball in the air, just because you just got to be under 40% on the ground ball end. You got to be an elite put the ball in the air guy, in my opinion.
I mean, like, how much more interesting would Zimmer be if he just like had Tyler Naquin's contact profile?
Can we merge them?
Like, Tyler Naquin doesn't even have an awesome, like, he has good contact authority certainly, but like he just has a slightly above average contact and contact authority profile. Like, you give that to Zimmer with plus defense and speed and center. That's the ball game.
Like, I mean, some would even say Naquin struck out 30% of the time in 2016, and he didn't have special below average ground. He put the ball in the air about average. He wasn't exceptional at that, but he still produced, and a lot of it was luck. But you just hit the ball hard, and good things happen. And Zimmer, he's one of those guys that can register can barrel up a ball here and there, but I feel like he makes a ton of weak contact as a result of. We talk about Francisco Mejia and Jose Ramirez as exceptional bat control guys. Zimmer's on the opposite end of the spectrum for me. You watch him, he flails.
I also have always hated watching guys who appear to me to have like a pretty limited offensive plan at the plate. Like, he's someone who I think takes a lot of like center cut strikes. I think he has a high walk rate just because he takes a crap ton of pitches, and it's partially why his strikeout rate's so elevated. I think he's someone who's at times can get overly passive and also doesn't like. I don't see him take advantage of advantageous counts as much as I'd like.
Well, let me ask you this: if you got a guy like Zimmer, like you're saying, who's overly passive, and K's all the time, what detriment is it to you to say, go up there and swing? I want to change your approach completely this winter, and I don't care if you walk 4% of the time, just put the ball in play.
Yeah, I think there would be so much. Like, I think you could cut his K percentage by 5% by just saying, like, every time you get up 1-0, swing. or just being much more aggressive early in counts, especially because his swing is like, his swing is pretty long. I think it requires a certain level of aggression.
It's
for it to play up.
Santana has a really long swing, right? Carlos Santana?
Yeah, that's what everybody says.
I'm just going off eye test again here.
Yeah, I think you're right, though.
But he has an elite eye to go with it, and he doesn't take strikes, or like he doesn't take many strikes. He fouls off difficult to hit strikes really well, and that's what I'm going to miss that this year. But anyway, Zimmer's eye just doesn't seem to match up with it. Like you said, it just seems overly passive, like he's committed to taking these pitches before they even happen or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I keep looking to see like why I should buy him making a major leap forward, and I don't see it yet. And I think he could be really good. I think he has a massive ceiling, but I think we're in one of those zones now where like it's an increasingly low probability that he like buries his ceiling creating flaws.
You want to know why you should buy it? Here's what because he is one slight adjustment away from being that 3-WAR guy.
Okay.
He is like you said, if he cuts that K percentage by 5% with average to slightly above average defense and swiping 30 bags, he's probably a 3-WAR guy at 105 weighted runs created plus, right?
Yeah. So
or if he just has an exceptional year getting the ball off the ground a little bit better, 5% more of the time. I just feel like he's so close to either end. That's why the variable is there, because as I speak about this, I feel like it could just as easy happen the other way, where he strikes out a few more times and hits a few more balls on the ground.
his swinging strike percentage is just so high.
It is. What was it exactly? Like 15?
14%. League average is 10.5%.
So Mike Napoli, hi.
Yeah. I also worry too. I think pitchers just figured out a way to like pitch him in, and he just never extends on baseballs enough to really hit them with contact authority.
No, and that's that long swing too. You can't get to the balls on the inside of the plate with that long swing.
Yeah, I don't know.
It just seems like if the Indians have like Matt Crotaro or who's their hitting coach, Ty Van Berkeley.
Yeah.
If those guys, I mean, obviously they know it a lot better than I would ever know it, and they're talking to these guys, but they got to do something to get him to shorten that up with his wheels and his profile on the K end.
Damn it, I'm really depressed now. I'm really depressed about this outfield.
If you shorten Zimmer's swing up, does that take away from his ceiling as the power guy that he was in Columbus for a while?
Yeah, probably, but like you have to, like I don't know. I just don't think there's a great case that like he's gonna tap into that power. I mean, he's a really muscular guy. I don't think shortening, like, you may diminish some power upside, but it's just so much. God, he's frustrating. I don't know how you like. I don't know what technical adjustments you can make that can really like diminish his K percentage this much. I mean, the good thing, which I was wrong about, but not the good thing. His O swing percentage is low, below league average. You know, he doesn't chase a ton. His zone swing percentage is above league average. So he actually has better pitch recognition than I gave him credit for earlier.
Better eye than what I was rambling about, I guess.
But the reality is, I mean, he just swings and misses way too much. And I think until he figures out a way to at least just like flip balls on the inner half or do something with balls on the inner half to make it so that he can't just be pounded in there all the time. It's not really sure how he can like make that like leap to 100, 110 WRC plus.
Are we putting too much stock into his short season last year?
Maybe, but I think we always knew, like, isn't this partially just bearing out the issues we always saw? Like you said, to me, the first clearance step I look at with every offensive prospect is K percentage, and then I look at age and level. And this is a guy who had K percentage problems throughout his minor league career, where he was a college bat and often, like, average age for the level. He wasn't young. To give you the thought that he would sort of adapt. Like, this is a guy who's average age for every level, or maybe a tick under, who always had K percentage problems, and, like, they're still here.
And you never saw that Bobby Bradley jump. Bobby Bradley 2017 jump.
How sexy is that? I think, like, one of the really fun parts of, like, this offseason and spring has been, like, looking back and realizing what a freak leap Bobby Bradley has made.
He's kind of a moniker for what the farm system is, because I think the Indians farm is kind of underrated as a whole. I
think so too.
I think there are some guys like Chang and Bradley that can really be impact major league players maybe. And for being a contender in year 3 of going into year 3 of World Series contention, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think the crazy thing too is, or one of the, like, there's maybe like a 1-year glut, right? Like there might be this like 1-year gap, but the Indians also just made huge investments in the international market and brought in a ton of upside. And then this year with Santana and Shaw leaving, you have a significant amount of comp picks. So you have like 4 of the first like top 80. So in terms of like turning over like higher upside talent in the system, the Indians have a couple of years of really being able to refurbish it while also like having Chang, Bradley, Allen, Shane Bieber's pretty close. Tristan McKenzie's a year away. Like a lot of talent that's actually pretty close, and they're just turning over the talent at the bottom third of the system. So I think I just think they're in really good organizational shape and maybe aren't getting credit for that, considering, like you said, like they cashed out major prospects for 3 years, 2.5 years of Andrew Miller, and like they're still in decent shape.
I mean, we even ditched a couple of fringe guys like Pannone for Joe Smith, and I mean, I would call him a fringe guy still, but he's got a chance. He's one of those boomer bust fringe guys, probably.
I think I love him as a floor loogie. He's like one of the smartest dudes I ever talked to. I love that dude.
So I wanted to ask you because, admittedly, I love looking at pitching stuff at the major league level, but it's really hard for me personally to follow it at the minor league level. I'm way more into following the hitting metrics in the minors. And
yeah,
what are the Indians' relief outlooks down there? Do you have any idea? I'm not well versed in it.
I'm like really low on a lot of dudes that people. I think Sean Moramondo should have been converted to a relief prospect like 4 years ago.
But
I think one of the things
with Moramondo, what overarching skill would have made him a good reliever?
I think he's just a loogie, right? Okay. Like he gets a decent amount of ground balls, and I think his stuff plays up against lefties. I think they screwed around with him in the rotation for a long time because they didn't really have a lot of rotation prospects. Sometimes his velocity plays up. I think the most interesting, I hope they don't do the same thing with Merriweather. I think Merriweather just makes a ton of sense in the bullpen. He has a really good fastball that plays up velo-wise, and he has a couple of like average secondary offerings that look a lot better if you can just use one of them or two of them at the big league level. But I think he's like a legit back-end upside guy who I'd really like to see them transition to like that role now instead of next year when they give up on him as a starter.
And we all want to know about the home runs too. And you wrote an article about Cody Anderson. So talk a little bit about what you think he can add if he could make the jump to the pen.
Yeah, one of the things I wrote about with Carrasco and Kluber is the Indians have gotten a lot better at optimizing arsenal usage and like going away from fastball. And I think Cody Anderson actually has a couple of decent secondary offerings that especially play up if he's throwing 96 from the pen. He's someone who's shown an ability to like play up his velocity when he's in the pen. If you're sitting 95, 96, I think his changeup is a real like average to above average pitch. Obviously, that only hurts lefties, and you have to like see if his slider can be average. But I think like those are all the components to being a better Dan Otero, which is like a 7th, 8th inning guy.
I would almost compare him to Zach McAllister with a decent second pitch.
Yeah, God, I wish McAllister could have figured that curveball out ever.
There are times when I've thought he's had it in the past couple of years, and then the next outing, it's just a disaster.
Yeah, he goes month to month with the curveball. I don't know what it is, and I don't know.
Like his back end of 2016 was incredible. I was hyped on McAllister.
I think he's going to be like one of those dudes that we're always sort of disappointed that he's just like an average middle reliever. Like, it's just sort of heartbreaking because his stuff is better than that, and it can be better than that. But his command fluctuates all the time. His curveball fluctuates. It's just so frustrating.
Who do we get him for from New York? Austin Kearns?
Yeah, I mean, we're in the money on him. We're in the money.
Oh, yeah. We were in the money when he made 3 big league starts.
But I don't know. This team has to make an outfield trade, right?
Right. That's why I was so high on Yelich. I don't know what it would have cost you, but that was like the move that could have, because he was under control with J-Ram and Lindor and Kluber and Carrasco. And
that's 5 premium talents for 4 years.
And
Like,
what did Milwaukee give up? Brinson and then a couple of fringe top 100 guys?
and I think Brinson is somebody who's viewed value-wise as below Mejia and someone who carries a massive risk profile.
Exactly. So I really think that could have went. You could have done that with Mejia because we know Milwaukee likes him. I mean, or no, not Milwaukee. Shoot, Mejia, Miami. I'm getting confused. Mejia, and then Chang, and then maybe a lotto ticket. I think that was the deal right there for it. And you don't know if Miami values these prospects the same way we do.
Yeah.
But Chang is the guy that I love, but the Indians can afford to give up.
I also feel like Chang's just the sort of guy that like you and I would love and the Indians organization would love, but teams like the Marlins who like still are like quasi archaic front offices or like a little behind the times don't love as much.
Those are winnowing out though. Those are
I agree.
know Miami's still like that, but you see more and more teams. You got your Miamis and your Detroits that are still way in the 1980s on that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like my main point with Miami is like I've talked to Kyle Bodie of Driveline, and he's like very, very willing to trash the fact that Miami's like 10 years behind developmentally and analytically, intellectually in general.
So they would love Mejia theoretically, especially if they're dealing Real Muto.
So like this is it made so much sense as a fit because they can flip Real Muto for a plus outfield prospect, maybe like similar to Brinson. Probably Brinson. I don't know. But I mean, it just made so much sense as a trade partner fit. And I think for the Indians, they are really nervous about whether he can stick a catcher. And all of a sudden it is really hard to find a positional fit. He's not DHing, he's not playing first. Can he play third? Probably not. It's really difficult to pick up. I mean, he's young, but it's really difficult. He has a cannon of an arm.
I would say
field? He playing right field?
I would have bet on anybody. If anybody's picking up third base from the catcher position, I would have bet on Santana. That guy puts his work in. Yeah. He's got an arm, and he's not bad with a glove. We saw it at first base. So he couldn't pick it up. So what does that spell for Mejia?
I mean, the positive is you have a guy who's like 22, super athletic, and has an arm. But I just think the reality is that Mejia is like a weird fit on this team, especially since I think Francona is incredibly loyal to the Roberto Perez Yan Gomes tandem. I mean, I just think that's I think if there's a time to add Mejia and like work him into the big leagues, you can play him 80 games, hit him against right-handed pitching, which both Perez and Gomes suck at, and he gets to learn from. You keep Perez, who's a great framer, game caller, thrower, who's just the perfect guy to work with Mejia over the next couple of years and turn him into an elite big league catcher. I think it's a wonderful pairing, and yet we're going to run the same two guys out there that we've run out for 3 straight years. And I like them both, but there's just like they don't hit right-handed pitching. There's no offensive upside left. I mean, there's only defensive decay in play, right? Like that's like the.
I mean, maybe there's a little bit more on offense with Roberto. I could make that argument maybe because he's never had that, and the only time he's had that extended look,
he was good.
He was good. Because he just has to be a league average hitter to be an immensely valuable catcher, right?
Yeah.
And
his eye gets you there, but his contact is terrible. It's the one thing. It is. He has to fix that.
I love a guy with an eye that can run into one every once in a while.
Yeah, I agree.
And Gomes, I just thought there was the perfect trade fit out there with Washington, but I don't, like you said, I don't think the front office could sell Tito on selling Gomes for a couple lotto ticket prospects because that's all you're going to get for him.
I mean, and I think too, like, I don't really care what people think is the underlying cause. There's like a huge like labor argument. A lot of it's the labor agreement, but the reality is like these sort of like close-ish to league average players who are around 30 are getting the crap squeezed out of them financially. And I think we entered the offseason saying, oh, the Gomes deal is pretty fair. That's probably movable. But I think you look at what some of these guys got and you realize that like maybe the Gomes deal, which is just like a little over around 20 million guaranteed over the next 2 years, just wasn't super movable in a market where Todd Frazier is getting 2 and 17.
I just don't think it's fair to compare catcher to anything else.
That's fair. That's fair.
There are no catchers hit the open market this year. None.
Hey, wasn't Wellington Castillo out there? You gonna do Wellington right like that? Come on, don't do Wellington.
Well, but thanks for proving my point, Mike. No, before we finish, I want to transition into this Napoli stuff. I saw you tweet out that good for the Indians for doing it, and I was thinking about that for a little while. I'm thinking about, okay, yeah, maybe they're helping this guy out, but I want to get your thoughts on how important are the spring plate appearances for guys like Yandy and Bobby Bradley?
I don't think they're super important.
No, I don't either, but it's really hard for me to place value on them.
I agree. I think the problem is, too, it's not just like there are certain spring PAs that are more valuable, too, right? Like half the PAs Bobby Bradley's getting right now are just AA PAs because he's coming in the 5th inning. He's facing another prospect.
Like Lou Brown in Major League, these guys are going to be bagging groceries in 2 weeks or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, like that's – I think part of it is – like if you're giving up Yandy PAs in the 5th inning against a AAA starter, like he owns AAA. He is like discipline that plays really well there. And so if you're giving up like if Napoli steals like what does he steal at most? Like Bobby Bradley and Diaz are going to go to minor league. Well, maybe not Diaz, but Bobby Bradley's going to go to minor league camp in what, like a week and a half?
Right, and maybe the Bobby Bradley ones don't matter because he's not making a big league club, and I don't care if he works it out early in Columbus or Akron. That's just – but the other thing is, and it was brought up in the comment section of the article that I did about Naquin and Kipnis, you also kind of worry about where this is coming from. Like, is however marginal the cost of these plate appearances they're losing, is it worth it to quell or to cater to Francona on this? Because you know that's where this came from. I mean, Antonetti's not out there saying, let's give this guy some plate appearances so he can play for another team.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, one of the really interesting things was there's a comment. I think it was probably Steve. He's always pretty grumpy in the comment. I love Steve. He makes the best points and he sharpens me up. But he was noting, like, what's $500,000 in a minor league deal to Matt Belisle as, like, sort of the profit of being this really favorable organization where, like, and this isn't the first time with Napoli, like, the Indians at the end of the season when Napoli was sucking, they had the division sewn up, gave him, like, 4 extra PAs that he didn't really need on the season's final day, so he'd hit, like, $100,000 performance bonus. They just do these little things that I think create a lot of, like, player respect, and, like, maybe there is some value in, like, the guys you get as flyers in spring training. I think they're – I mean, I don't think they've necessarily had it this year, but I think, like, for instance, Austin Jackson last year coming in as a flyer, like, he was a guy that was a really high-quality flyer, minor league guy, that I think maybe if you do this sort of stuff for Napoli and it gives you a 15% chance higher of, like, getting some of these, like, vets to do minor league invite flyers, that's a huge value. So I don't know. I agree. I don't know how to value the at-bats. I don't buy into the bullshit leadership thing. This team won 102 games last year. They don't need Mike Napoli to get them to work, okay? That's the dumbest shit. I hate that. They don't need him in the clubhouse. They lost a weird series to the Yankees. He sucked in the playoffs last year. The year before. He sucked in general last year. The Indians have leaders, and I think it undermines the team to suggest that, like, they need Mike Napoli to get them to work. Like,
well, and you brought up a fair point, because I hadn't really considered the aspect of how the fringe benefits with other players of doing little things like this, and I would admit that I hadn't considered that. But if Jason Giambi hadn't manned this team for half a season in 2013, I wouldn't have any concern about this. There is some part of me that thinks Francona might just try and pull a fast one and get Mike Napoli on his 25-man.
yeah, there is the like I commented, because I had spoken to like one or two people in the Indians org who were like, yeah, this is a total just like favor to Nap. But I was like, yeah, like we'll see what that's like when he runs into 3 dingers, because like that's gonna happen. Like he's gonna hit a couple big bombs in Arizona, because that's like what he does. He's physically like probably healthy right now, and that's where it gets dicey. But they're smart enough. Like Francona does stuff and keeps dudes around. Currently, the guy I'm most worried about, I think we're going to see a lot of Rob Refsnyder this year. Like, no joke.
Daniel Robertson of 2018.
Yeah, I think that's like really possible. Napoli, like, he was so bad last year, and I think I'm just not scared. And I think the Indians know they can't, like, you can't keep Eddie and Nap on the same team. Like, that's impossible. They both can't play first base anymore. Like Nap, like Eddie's going to play first base like 20 times this year, and it's going to be atrocious because it was bad last year, and it's not getting better. And also, he looks pretty portly this spring, even for him.
Okay, well, hopefully that portly leads to 50 bombs instead of 40.
That's fine with me.
I don't care how portly the dude is. We saw David Ortiz being effective when he was.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the offense. I'm just saying I don't want either of those dudes playing defense ever again.
No, and that's the thing. Like, I don't think Eddie has to play defense ever. He will. Like you said, he will play 20 games, but you can work it out so that you got Yandy playing over there or something, somebody who's mobile. And one last thing before we end up wrapping this up, but is there a way, like Yonder, this has been my big thing, he can't hit lefties, and neither can, Kipnis has been really fleeting in that area. I don't buy him hitting lefties this year. Yeah. So is Yandy the answer there?
Yeah, so like Yandy's kind of the dream, right? Like, he's such a good util guy. Like, teaching him first base is going to be stupid easy. He's really tall, which makes first base a lot easier as a starting point. He can play third fine, maybe above average, despite what Francona says when he's trying to come up with a reason to send him down to AAA. It just makes so sense because you can hide Alonso for 30 games. You can give Kip some break using, like, Diaz, flipping Ramirez over. You can give Ramirez breaks using Diaz. It's really easy to get Diaz, like, 80 to 100 games, and 60 of those starts against left-handed pitching, which he's going to rake against. That's so easy. That makes so much sense. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I don't care about hiding Yonder or Kip against lefties all the time. They can face them sometimes. They're still, even though they don't hit them as well, they can still run into one and turn it. I just worry about, and I've never been the guy who worries about platoons that much, like versus lefties that much, because you only see them so often. But I just kind of worry this year because they are left-handed heavier than ever this year.
And I think too, it's interesting also having a guy you're willing to flex in mid-game in high leverage scenarios, because I think as the game becomes more and more specialized, like it used to be, maybe you're like a lot of teams carry only one lefty. Now you usually have like a lefty who can throw a full inning and then a lefty who's just a loogie. Like, I think having a counter who's positionally versatile and can fix problems with like 3 or 4 different players is really good. And I just think Diaz can be that guy. Like Eric Gonzalez cannot be that guy. Giovanni Urshela will never be that guy. But,
Eric Gonzalez could be maybe like if he reaches full potential at some point, but not in 2018.
And I don't know. I'm like so low on some of these guys that we've talked about forever as prospects. Like Gonzalez and Urshela, we've talked about forever because I think they came when we were overlooking other dudes, when the system was somewhat thin. Like, Giovanni Urshela is not a big league baseball player. Like, I love his glove. It's fantastic. But you cannot keep a guy who can play third and maybe second really well defensively and has zero offensive upside. Like,
you can bat him in the last out of the Game 7 of the World Series.
Well, yeah. I mean, that was a tactically brilliant move.
But
I agree,
though.
Are we gonna look back on that differently? Like, I feel like Indians fans don't get that pissed at Tito about that and act like that was like some sort of like nerdy people like us do. But I just feel like if the Indians don't win a World Series in the next 2 or 3 years, in like 15 years, we're gonna look back and be like, holy shit.
Well, I think what the basis of that is, us nerdy guys, me and you and whoever else can dive into the sequencing luck, and we kind of don't give Francona the credit for the rest of the 2016 playoffs that everybody else does, because we know that a lot of managerial decisions are just high variance crapshoots. So I think a lot of people are willing to forgive the Martinez thing because it looked like he could do no wrong the whole rest of that playoffs.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, well, I'm going to try and keep Gage and I from going too far, so I'm going to wrap this up. But important, if you're ever looking for tickets, Gage is all the time. He goes to Ohio State all the time. 28 beers later, I get a bunch of angry DMs. So check out Minuteman Tickets. Give them a call. Phone number's at the drop. This is Mike and Gage. We have a weird podcast name that I can't remember. I think it's Hot Takes at the corner
of Hot Takes in Ontario.
I like that. And I'm mostly here for the hot takes. Gage is here to talk me down. Anyway, that's all. Give us some feedback, what you'd like to hear more of, what you wouldn't want to hear, all that stuff. Have a good night.
Yeah, Minuteman Tickets, 614-943-3000.
Bingo.